Most people spend their youth running after money, running after recognition, running after the approval of others. They believe that if they just achieve a little more, earn a little more, prove themselves a little more, then finally life will feel complete. But something unexpected happens as the years pass. The body slows down, the mind becomes quieter, and one day, a powerful realization appears. Many of the things we spent decades chasing never truly mattered. The Buddha often spoke about this. He said human beings live most of their lives trapped in illusion. We chase what does not satisfy. We cling to what cannot stay, and we worry about things that disappear like morning mist. But as people grow older, the illusion slowly begins to break. Suddenly, life becomes clearer. The noise of the world fades, and wisdom begins to rise. Old age is not only the weakening of the body, it is the awakening of the mind. Today we will explore 7 profound truths people often realize only when they grow old. Truths about attachment, truths about suffering, and truths about the quiet peace the Buddha spoke about long ago. Some people learn these lessons after 70 years of life, but if you understand them today, your entire life may become lighter. Before we begin, tell me something in the comments. Where are you watching this video from, and how old are you right now? Because depending on your age, some of these realizations may already be waiting inside your own life. Now let us begin with the first realization. The first realization: almost everything is temporary. When people are young, life feels solid, the body feels strong, time feels endless, and the world appears stable, as if everything around us will remain the same forever. Friendships seem permanent. Success feels like it will last forever. Even the struggles and worries of youth feel as though they will never disappear. But as the years quietly pass, something begins to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the illusion of permanence begins to fade. The Buddha spoke about this truth many centuries ago. He taught that one of the deepest realities of life is impermanence. In Buddhism, this is called anicca. Everything that arises will eventually pass away. Every moment changes. Every situation transforms. Every life moves through cycles of birth, growth, decay, and disappearance. But when we are young, we rarely understand this. The mind clings tightly to people, achievements, possessions, and expectations. We believe the job we have now will always define us. We believe the relationships we cherish today will never change. We believe the success we chase will bring lasting satisfaction. Yet old age slowly reveals a quiet and powerful truth. Nothing in this world remains the same. Friends move away. Circumstances change. The body that once felt tireless begins to grow slower. Even the thoughts and desires that once felt so important gradually lose their power. At first, this realization may feel uncomfortable. The mind resists it because the ego prefers stability. It prefers control. It prefers the comforting illusion that things will stay exactly as they are. But life does not follow the wishes of the ego. Life flows like a river, always moving, always changing, never standing still. An elderly monk once explained this truth to a young student who was deeply upset about losing something valuable. The monk simply pointed to the leaves falling from a nearby tree. He said softly, "Do you see those leaves? They appear in spring, grow through summer, and fall in autumn. Nothing about them was meant to stay forever." Our lives follow the same law. When we begin to understand impermanence, something remarkable happens inside the mind. Attachment begins to loosen. The tight grip we hold on things slowly relaxes. Instead of desperately trying to control life, we begin to observe it. Instead of clinging to every pleasant moment, we learn to appreciate it while it lasts. Instead of resisting change, we start to accept it as the natural movement of existence. This understanding brings a kind of freedom that cannot be purchased with money or status, because much of human suffering comes from the desire to freeze life in place. We want happiness to last forever. We want youth to last forever. We want success to remain unchanged. But the Buddha reminded his followers that suffering arises when we try to hold on to what cannot remain. Old age gently reveals this truth. With time, people look back and realize that entire chapters of life have already passed. Schools, careers, relationships, cities, ambitions, they rise, they flourish, and then they fade into memory. What once felt permanent becomes a story we tell about the past. But this realization is not meant to create sadness. In fact, understanding impermanence can bring deep peace, because when we truly accept that everything is temporary, the mind stops fighting reality. We begin to cherish moments more deeply. We appreciate simple experiences that we once ignored. A quiet morning, a conversation with a loved one, the sound of wind moving through trees, the warmth of sunlight on the skin. These small moments suddenly feel more precious when we realize they will not last forever. The Buddha often encouraged his followers to contemplate impermanence, not to create fear, but to awaken wisdom. Because when we see clearly that everything changes, our priorities begin to shift. We stop wasting energy on meaningless conflicts. We stop clinging to unnecessary possessions. We stop chasing approval from people whose opinions change like the wind. Instead, we begin to cultivate qualities that remain meaningful throughout life. Kindness, compassion, patience, awareness. These inner qualities grow stronger as the mind becomes wiser, and unlike wealth or status, they cannot be taken away by time. This is why many elderly people begin to value simplicity. The noisy ambitions of youth become less attractive. The endless competition of the world begins to feel exhausting, and a quiet desire for peace starts to replace the restless hunger for achievement. In Buddhist monasteries, elder monks often appear calm and untroubled, not because their lives were free of hardship, but because they have witnessed impermanence again and again. They have seen success rise and fall. They have seen pain appear and disappear. They have watched life unfold like waves on the surface of the ocean. And through this observation, they develop a deep understanding. Everything changes, everything moves, everything passes. When the mind truly understands this, it becomes much harder to be shaken by temporary events. Insults lose their power, losses feel less overwhelming, even difficult moments become easier to accept, because the mind quietly remembers, this too will pass. This is one of the first realizations that often becomes clear in old age. Life is not something we can hold still. It is something we experience moment by moment as it flows, and once we accept this truth, the mind becomes lighter. The struggle to control everything slowly fades, and in its place arises a calm awareness of the present moment. This is the beginning of wisdom. It is the first step toward the peaceful mind the Buddha described, and it is a realization that many people only fully understand after many years of living. But those who understand it earlier can begin walking the path of wisdom much sooner. The second realization: chasing the world never truly satisfies the heart. When people are young, the world appears full of promises. There is always something to chase: a better job, a bigger house, more money, more recognition, more admiration from others. The mind becomes convinced that happiness is waiting somewhere in the future. If I achieve this, I will finally feel fulfilled. If I gain that, I will finally feel peace. So the years are spent running toward goals, running toward success, running toward a version of happiness that always seems just one step further away. At first, this pursuit feels exciting. Ambition creates energy. Dreams create motivation. The mind believes it is moving closer and closer to a perfect life. But something subtle begins to happen as time passes. Even when one goal is reached, the satisfaction does not last very long. A promotion is achieved, For a moment, the mind feels proud, but soon the excitement fades. A new desire appears. A larger goal replaces the previous one. A person buys something they once believed would bring happiness. A car, a house, a symbol of success. But after some time, the mind adapts. What once felt special becomes ordinary. The satisfaction slowly dissolves, and the search begins again. This cycle continues again and again. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that human suffering is often rooted in craving. In Buddhism, this is called tanha, the endless thirst for more. The mind constantly whispers, "This is not enough. You need something else. You need something better." Because of this craving, people spend their lives chasing external things. Yet the more they chase, the more restless the mind becomes. Old age slowly reveals this pattern. After decades of striving, many people look back and notice something surprising. The things they worked hardest to obtain did not bring the lasting happiness they imagined. Wealth brought comfort, but not peace. Recognition brought attention, but not fulfillment. Possessions brought convenience, but not inner freedom. The heart still felt restless, still searching, still unsatisfied. An old Buddhist monk once shared a story with a group of students. He said that when he was young, he believed happiness was waiting somewhere far away. So he spent many years traveling, studying, working, and trying to achieve more. But one day, after many decades of effort, he realized something unexpected. He had traveled in circles. The peace he had been searching for was never outside him. It had always been within. The Buddha described this realization as awakening, because true contentment does not arise from what we possess. It arises from the state of the mind. A person may live in a simple hut with very few belongings and still feel deep peace. Another person may live surrounded by luxury and still feel empty. The difference is not in the outer world. The difference is in the mind's relationship with desire. When the mind constantly craves more, nothing ever feels enough. But when the mind learns to appreciate the present moment, even simple things become sources of quiet joy. Old age often softens the hunger for endless achievement. The competition that once seemed so important begins to lose its meaning. The desire to prove oneself to the world begins to fade. Many elderly people discover that what they truly value is not wealth or status. It is peace. It is meaningful connection. It is the quiet contentment of a calm mind. This is why the Buddha taught the middle way. He did not encourage extreme indulgence in worldly pleasures, but he also did not encourage harsh rejection of life. Instead, he taught balance, a life where the mind is not enslaved by desire, a life where one can participate in the world without being controlled by it. When people finally realize that endless chasing cannot satisfy the heart, something profound begins to shift. The mind slows down. The need to compete weakens. The pressure to constantly achieve dissolves. Instead, a different kind of happiness begins to appear. A quieter happiness, a deeper happiness, one that does not depend on what we gain from the outside world, but arises naturally from within. The Buddha once said that a peaceful mind is the greatest wealth a person can possess. Not gold, not fame, not power, but a mind that is free from constant craving. Old age often teaches this lesson slowly. After years of striving, people begin to see clearly that the race never truly ends. There will always be another goal, another competition, another desire waiting around the corner. But wisdom appears when the mind finally asks a simple question. Why am I running? Where am I trying to go? And sometimes the deepest realization is this: there was never a finish line waiting at the end of the race. There was only the present moment, waiting quietly the entire time. This is the second realization many people discover when they grow older. The world can offer many experiences, but true peace cannot be found by chasing more and more. It appears when the mind learns to stop chasing altogether and begins to rest in awareness. The third realization: many of the people we try to impress will eventually disappear from our lives. When people are young, a large part of their life is shaped by the opinions of others. The mind constantly asks silent questions. What do people think about me? Do they respect me? Do they admire me? Am I successful in their eyes? Because of this invisible pressure, many decisions in life are not made from wisdom. They are made from the desire to impress others. People choose careers not because the work brings them peace, but because the title sounds impressive. They buy things not because they truly need them, but because those things signal success. They shape their personality to match what society rewards. Approval becomes a powerful force. The mind begins to believe that the opinions of others are extremely important, and so life becomes a performance of status, a performance of achievement, a performance of success. But time slowly reveals a surprising truth. The people whose approval once felt so important rarely remain in our lives forever. Classmates who once seemed inseparable eventually move away. Colleagues who once defined our daily lives disappear when jobs change. Neighbors relocate, communities transform, even entire social circles fade with time. The Buddha understood this clearly. He taught that relationships in the world are subject to the same law of impermanence as everything else. People come together for a period of time. They share moments. They influence one another. And then life continues to move forward. This does not mean relationships are meaningless. On the contrary, they can be deeply valuable. But the mistake people often make in youth is believing that social approval defines their worth. Old age gently dissolves this illusion. After many decades of life, people often look back and realize something almost shocking. Much of the stress they experienced in their younger years came from trying to satisfy people who eventually disappeared from their story. The co-worker whose opinion once felt so critical may now be someone whose name is barely remembered. The social expectations that once seemed so important may now feel trivial. The competition for recognition may now seem strangely unnecessary, and the mind begins to see something clearly. Life was never meant to be lived as a performance for others. It was meant to be lived with awareness. There is an old story told in Buddhist monasteries about a young monk who constantly tried to impress everyone around him. He practiced harder than anyone else. He spoke with great confidence about his discipline. He made sure others noticed his dedication. But one day, an elder monk quietly asked him a question. "Why do you practice so loudly?" The young monk was confused. "What do you mean?" The elder monk replied gently, "When the mind is truly peaceful, it no longer seeks witnesses." This simple teaching contains deep wisdom. When the mind is attached to the opinions of others, it becomes restless. Every compliment creates temporary pleasure. Every criticism creates pain. Every comparison creates anxiety. But when the mind begins to free itself from the need for constant approval, a different kind of freedom appears. A person becomes less concerned with how they appear and more concerned with how they live. This shift often happens naturally in old age. The desire to impress begins to fade, not because people become careless, but because they begin to see what truly matters. They begin to understand that life is not measured by applause. It is measured by inner peace. The Buddha often reminded his followers that the world is full of changing opinions. One day people praise you, another day they criticize you, one day you are admired, another day you are ignored. These shifting winds of praise and blame are natural parts of human society, but if the mind becomes attached to them, it will never be stable. The Buddha called these forces the 8 worldly conditions: praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, pleasure and pain. These conditions move through life like waves. If we allow our happiness to depend on them, the mind will rise and fall endlessly. But if we understand their impermanent nature, we begin to step outside the storm. Old age often makes this lesson unmistakably clear. After many years of life, people recognize that the judgments of others change constantly. The people who once admired you may one day forget you. The people who once doubted you may later respect you. But none of these opinions truly define who you are. What truly shapes a life is the quality of the mind: kindness, compassion, patience, wisdom. These qualities remain meaningful regardless of how others perceive us. And when the mind begins to focus on these inner qualities rather than external approval, life becomes much lighter. A person no longer needs to constantly prove themselves. They no longer feel trapped in endless comparison. They no longer measure their value through the eyes of strangers. Instead, they begin to live more authentically, more peacefully, more honestly. Old age often reveals something profound. Many of the people we spent years trying to impress were never the judges of our life. They were simply fellow travelers passing through their own journeys. Once this realization becomes clear, the mind begins to relax. The pressure to constantly perform disappears, and in its place appears a quiet sense of freedom, a freedom to live simply, a freedom to act with sincerity, a freedom to be present without needing constant validation. This is the third realization many people discover as they grow older. The opinions of others are temporary, but the peace of a clear and compassionate mind can remain for a lifetime. And those who understand this truth earlier in life can avoid carrying unnecessary burdens for many years. They can walk through the world with calm dignity, not seeking applause, not fearing criticism, simply living with awareness and balance, just as the Buddha taught. The fourth realization: the people you love are the most precious part of life. When people are young, they often believe that time will always be there. There will always be another chance to visit a friend, another chance to call a parent, another chance to sit and listen to someone who cares about them. Life feels long. Days feel endless. Because of this illusion, many people unknowingly take the presence of loved ones for granted. They become busy chasing success, busy chasing recognition, busy chasing personal goals and ambitions. Relationships slowly move into the background. Family conversations become shorter. Visits become less frequent. Moments of connection are replaced by schedules and responsibilities. At the time, it does not seem like a serious problem. The mind believes there will always be time later to reconnect, later to express gratitude, later to appreciate the people who walk beside us. But as the years pass, life begins to reveal a deeper truth. People do not stay forever. Parents grow older, friends move away. Some relationships quietly fade with time. Others disappear suddenly, leaving only memories behind. Old age often brings a painful but powerful realization. Many of the people who once filled our lives with warmth are no longer present. The voices we once heard every day become distant echoes in memory. The faces we once saw regularly become photographs from another time, and the mind begins to understand something it could not fully see in youth. The most valuable part of life was never the things we collected. It was the people we shared our life with. The Buddha spoke often about the importance of human connection. He reminded his followers that while attachment can create suffering, compassion and loving-kindness are essential qualities for a meaningful life. In Buddhism, this quality is known as metta, loving-kindness. Metta is the sincere wish for others to be happy, safe and free from suffering. It is not based on possession or control. It is based on care. When people are young, relationships are sometimes approached with expectation. We expect others to support us. We expect them to understand us. We expect them to fulfill certain roles in our lives. But as people grow older, many begin to see relationships differently. Instead of asking what they can receive from others, they begin to appreciate the simple miracle of shared existence. They begin to realize that every conversation, every shared meal, every moment of laughter is temporary and therefore deeply precious. An elderly monk once told a story to his students about a man who spent most of his life working tirelessly to build wealth. The man believed that success would bring happiness to his family, so he worked longer hours, sacrificed weekends, delayed vacations. He believed that once he achieved enough success, he would finally have time to enjoy life with the people he loved. But when he finally slowed down many years later, he he discovered something heartbreaking. His children had grown distant, his parents had already passed away, and many of the friendships he once had were gone. The wealth remained, but the moments he had postponed were gone forever. The monk looked at his students and said gently, "Do not postpone love." Old age often teaches this lesson with great clarity. People begin to see that relationships are not something to be managed only when convenient. They are the heart of human life. The Buddha often emphasized that kindness toward others creates deep inner peace. When we treat others with patience and compassion, the mind becomes lighter. When we express appreciation and gratitude, the heart becomes warmer. When we support others through difficult times, we create bonds that carry deep meaning. But when people become too absorbed in personal ambition, they may miss these opportunities. They may forget to say simple things like, "Thank you, I appreciate you, I am grateful you are in my life." Old age often awakens a quiet longing for these expressions. People begin to remember moments when they could have been more patient, more attentive, more loving, and they begin to understand that the greatest wealth of life was never material. It was relational. It was the warmth of shared presence. The Buddha once explained that life is like travelers meeting briefly at a crossroads. For a short time, their paths overlap. They share stories, they walk together, they support one another. But eventually, each traveler continues along their own path. Understanding this truth does not make relationships less important. In fact, it makes them more meaningful, because when we recognize that time with others is limited, we begin to treat those moments with greater care. A simple conversation becomes valuable. A quiet walk with someone becomes memorable. Even sitting together in silence can feel peaceful. Old age often replaces the restless pursuit of achievement with a deeper appreciation for connection. The competition of youth fades. The desire to impress others fades. What remains is a quiet recognition. Life is not measured by how much we gained. It is measured by how deeply we cared. And when people reach the later chapters of their life, they often realize that the moments they treasure most are not moments of victory or recognition. They are moments of love, a shared smile, a kind word, a moment of understanding, a simple presence beside someone who matters. This realization can be both beautiful and bittersweet, because while the heart feels gratitude for those memories, it also recognizes how quickly time passed. But there is wisdom hidden within this realization, because even if we cannot change the past, we can change how we live today. We can choose to be more present with the people around us. We can choose to listen more carefully, to speak more kindly, to appreciate the people who walk beside us in this moment. The Buddha taught that cultivating compassion toward others is one of the most powerful ways to develop a peaceful mind, because when we genuinely wish happiness for others, the mind becomes less self-centered, less restless, more open, more calm. Old age often reveals that love and compassion are not weaknesses, they are strengths. They are the qualities that bring meaning to a human life. This is the fourth realization many people discover as they grow older. In the end, the most precious parts of life are not achievements or possessions. They are the people we shared our journey with and the kindness we offered along the way. Those who understand this earlier in life can begin to live differently. They can slow down, appreciate more deeply, and treat every moment with loved ones as the rare and beautiful gift that it truly is. The fifth realization: holding on to anger only burdens the mind. When people are young, conflicts often feel extremely important. Arguments with friends feel intense. Disagreements with family feel personal. Criticism from others feels like an attack on identity. Because the ego is still strong and sensitive, the mind quickly reacts with anger, resentment, and pride. Words spoken in a moment of frustration can stay in the mind for years. Memories of past arguments replay again and again. The mind tells itself stories. Stories about who was right. Stories about who was wrong. Stories about how unfair life sometimes feels. Because of this, many people carry invisible burdens for a long time. They carry grudges. They carry resentment. They carry silent bitterness toward people they once cared about. But something interesting often happens as people grow older. With the passing of many years, those same conflicts begin to look very different. Arguments that once felt enormous begin to seem strangely small. The anger that once burned so strongly begins to fade. The mind starts to ask a simple but powerful question: why did I carry this anger for so long? The Buddha spoke very clearly about the nature of anger. He explained that anger is like holding a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. Before the coal ever reaches the other person, it burns the one who is holding it. This teaching reveals something important. Anger may feel powerful in the moment, but over time, it quietly damages the mind that clings to it. It creates restlessness. It creates tension. It keeps the heart trapped in the past. Old age often reveals how heavy these emotional burdens truly are. After decades of life, people begin to see clearly that many of the conflicts they once carried were never worth the weight they placed on their heart. A harsh word spoken many years ago no longer seems so important. A disagreement that once created distance may now feel trivial, and the mind slowly begins to understand that life is far too short to spend it holding on to bitterness. In Buddhist teachings, anger is considered one of the 3 poisons of the mind. Along with greed and ignorance, anger clouds wisdom and creates suffering. When the mind becomes dominated by anger, it loses its ability to see clearly. Every situation appears distorted. Every interaction feels tense. Even moments that could bring peace become overshadowed by unresolved resentment. But when the mind begins to release anger, something remarkable happens. A great weight disappears. The mind becomes lighter. The heart becomes more open. Peace begins to return. An elderly monk once shared a lesson with a young student who was struggling with resentment toward someone who had insulted him. The student explained the situation in great detail. He described exactly what had happened, exactly what had been said, exactly how unfair the situation felt. When he finished speaking, the monk listened quietly. Then he asked a simple question: "Tell me, how long ago did this happen?" The student replied, "About 5 years ago." The monk nodded gently and asked another question: "During these 5 years, how many times has this person insulted you again?" The student paused and said, "None." The monk smiled softly and said, "Then who has been repeating the insult all these years?" The student slowly realized something important. The person who had hurt him had already moved on, but his own mind had continued to replay the pain again and again. This is how resentment works. It traps the mind in the past. It keeps wounds open long after the event has ended. Old age often brings a clearer understanding of this pattern. People begin to see that many of their emotional wounds were sustained not by the original event, but by their repeated attachment to it. They carried the memory, they repeated the story, they relived the anger, and in doing so they prolonged their own suffering. When this realization appears, forgiveness begins to look very different. Forgiveness is not about pretending something never happened. It is not about excusing harmful behavior. Instead, forgiveness is about releasing the burden from one's own heart. It is about choosing peace over endless mental conflict. The Buddha taught that compassion can transform even the most difficult emotions. When we begin to see that every person is struggling with their own fears, confusion, and suffering, anger begins to soften. We realize that many harmful actions arise from ignorance rather than deliberate cruelty. People hurt others because they themselves are trapped in pain. People speak harshly because they are overwhelmed by their own emotions. Understanding this does not justify harmful actions, but it allows the mind to respond with wisdom instead of endless hostility. Old age often reveals that the time spent holding on to resentment was time that could have been spent in peace. Many elderly people look back and wish they had forgiven sooner, not for the sake of others, but for their own inner freedom, because the longer anger is carried, the heavier it becomes. But the moment the mind releases it, a surprising calm appears. The Buddha encouraged his followers to cultivate loving kindness and compassion toward all beings, even toward those who have caused harm. Because compassion dissolves the boundaries that anger creates. When compassion grows, resentment loses its power, and the mind begins to rest in a state of balance. Old age often replaces pride with humility. The desire to win every argument fades. The need to prove oneself right becomes less important. What matters more is peace. What matters more is harmony. What matters more is living the remaining years of life with a clear and gentle heart. Many elderly people eventually realize that forgiveness is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that peace of mind is more valuable than victory in conflict. This is the fifth realization many people discover when they grow older. Holding on to anger only prolongs suffering, but releasing resentment allows the mind to breathe again. It allows the heart to open again, and it creates the quiet inner freedom that the Buddha described as the path toward true peace. Those who understand this earlier in life can avoid carrying unnecessary emotional burdens for many years. They can walk through life with a lighter heart, a calmer mind, and a deeper sense of compassion for themselves and others, just as the Buddha encouraged his followers to do. The sixth realization: the body slowly weakens, but the mind can become stronger. When people are young, the body feels powerful. Energy seems endless. A person can wake up early, work all day, move quickly, and still feel strong. The body obeys almost every command of the mind. Because of this strength, many people rarely think about the fragile nature of physical life. Youth creates an illusion of invincibility. It feels as though the body will always remain capable, always remain energetic, always remain under our control. But as the years pass, life quietly begins to teach a different lesson. The body slowly changes. Movements that once felt effortless begin to require more care. The speed of youth gradually softens. Energy that once seemed limitless becomes more precious. Hair turns gray. The skin shows the marks of time. The body begins to speak a language that youth often ignores, the language of impermanence. The Buddha spoke often about the changing nature of the body. He reminded his followers that the physical body is not something we truly possess. It is something we temporarily experience. It is formed by conditions. It grows, it changes, and eventually it declines. But the purpose of understanding this truth was never to create fear. The Buddha taught this so that people could awaken to something deeper, something far more important than physical strength. He taught that while the body inevitably weakens with time, the mind has the potential to grow wiser, stronger, calmer, more peaceful. This is one of the great discoveries many people make in old age. When youth fades, the mind finally has the opportunity to observe life more carefully, without the constant rush of ambition, without the endless competition of younger years, without the constant pressure to prove oneself. The mind begins to slow down, and when the mind slows down, awareness begins to deepen. An elderly monk once said something very simple but very profound to his students: when the body becomes slower, the mind finally has time to see. In youth, life often feels like a race. People rush from one goal to another, one responsibility to another, one distraction to another. Because of this speed, many moments pass without being fully experienced. But old age often introduces a new rhythm to life. A rhythm of patience, a rhythm of observation, a rhythm of quiet reflection. And within this slower rhythm, the mind begins to notice things that once went unseen. The beauty of a quiet morning, the peacefulness of silence, the subtle movement of breath, the simple joy of being present in a single moment. These experiences may appear small, but to a mind that has become calm and attentive, they hold deep meaning. The Buddha taught that the greatest strength a person can develop is not physical power, it is mastery of the mind. A mind that is stable cannot easily be disturbed. A mind that is mindful cannot easily be deceived by illusions. A mind that understands impermanence does not panic when change occurs. Old age often brings this kind of understanding. After witnessing many cycles of life, people begin to see patterns. They see how success rises and falls, how emotions come and go, how situations that once felt overwhelming eventually pass. Through these observations, the mind becomes less reactive, less impulsive, less controlled by temporary feelings. Instead, it becomes steady, like a mountain that remains unmoved while storms pass over it. The Buddha compared the disciplined mind to a well-trained elephant. Just as a trained elephant can remain calm even in chaotic surroundings, a trained mind can remain peaceful even when life becomes difficult. Old age provides many opportunities to cultivate this calmness, because when physical strength decreases, people naturally spend more time reflecting. They begin to examine their experiences. They begin to understand their past actions. They begin to see clearly what truly mattered and what did not. Through this reflection, wisdom slowly develops, and wisdom is far more valuable than physical strength. Physical strength fades with time, but wisdom can grow until the very end of life. There are many elderly people who appear physically fragile, yet possess an extraordinary calmness of mind. Their presence feels peaceful, their words carry clarity, their perspective feels balanced. This is the strength of wisdom. It is the strength that arises from understanding life deeply. The Buddha himself emphasized that enlightenment does not depend on physical ability. It depends on awareness. It depends on understanding. It depends on the ability to observe the mind with clarity. Even a person whose body has become weak can cultivate compassion. They can cultivate mindfulness. They can cultivate inner peace. These qualities do not require youthful energy. They require sincerity and awareness. Old age often removes many distractions that once filled life. Responsibilities become fewer, external pressures decrease, and this creates space for deeper reflection. Many people who reach this stage begin to ask meaningful questions. What truly matters in life? What kind of person have I become? What kind of peace do I wish to cultivate in the time that remains? These questions lead the mind toward wisdom. They lead the mind toward a deeper understanding of existence. And when a person begins to cultivate awareness in this way, they discover something surprising. Peace does not depend on youth. Peace does not depend on physical perfection. Peace depends on the condition of the mind. The Buddha taught that the mind is the source of both suffering and liberation. If the mind is restless, even a comfortable life will feel unsatisfying. But if the mind becomes calm and aware, even simple circumstances can bring deep contentment. Old age often reveals this truth clearly, because after many years of chasing external achievements, people begin to see that the greatest transformation happens within. A peaceful mind becomes more valuable than physical strength. A compassionate heart becomes more valuable than external success, and a wise perspective becomes more valuable than youthful speed. This is the sixth realization many people discover as they grow older. The body may weaken with time, but the mind has the potential to become stronger, clearer, and more peaceful than ever before. And those who begin cultivating awareness earlier in life can develop this strength long before old age arrives. They can walk through every stage of life with a stable mind, a compassionate heart, and the quiet wisdom that the Buddha encouraged all beings to develop. When people are young, life often feels like a long journey filled with endless destinations. There are goals to reach, dreams to accomplish, victories to achieve. The mind imagines a future where everything will finally come together. a future where happiness will arrive and remain forever. Because of this belief, many people spend their lives preparing for a moment that never truly arrives. They believe that one day they will finally feel satisfied. One day they will finally feel peaceful. One day they will finally feel complete. But old age slowly reveals something very surprising. Life does not reach a perfect moment where everything suddenly becomes complete. Instead, life continues to move forward one moment at a time. Achievements appear, then they fade. Possessions are gained, then they are left behind. Fame rises, then it disappears. The world continues its endless movement, and as people reach the later stages of their life, a quiet realization often begins to appear. Many of the things they believed would define their happiness were never truly the most important part of their life. The Buddha understood this truth deeply. He taught that everything in the external world is unstable. Everything that arises will eventually pass away. But there is something within each person that has the potential to become stable: the mind. The Buddha often reminded his followers that the condition of the mind determines the quality of life. Two people may live in very different circumstances, yet their inner experience can be completely different. One person may possess great wealth, comfort, and recognition, yet feel restless and unsatisfied. Another person may live a simple life with very few possessions, yet feel deeply peaceful. The difference lies not in the outside world, but in the state of the mind. Old age often makes this truth unmistakably clear. After many decades of chasing goals, solving problems, and overcoming challenges, people begin to see that their external story is only one small part of their life. What truly shaped their experience was how their mind responded to those events. When the mind reacted with anger, life felt heavy. When the mind reacted with fear, life felt unstable. When the mind reacted with craving, life felt incomplete. But when the mind developed patience, compassion, and awareness, life felt lighter. This realization often appears gradually. People begin to notice that memories of their past are filled with many different events. Some were joyful, some were painful, some were exciting, some were disappointing, but the emotional impact of those experiences was determined by the state of the mind at that time. The same event can feel completely different depending on the clarity of the mind. This is why the Buddha placed such great emphasis on cultivating awareness. He taught that training the mind is the most important work a person can do in their life, because without training, the mind easily becomes trapped in cycles of suffering. It chases desires, it resists unpleasant experiences, it clings to the past, it fears the future, and in doing so, it creates endless dissatisfaction. But when the mind becomes mindful, it begins to see things differently. It begins to observe thoughts rather than being controlled by them. It begins to experience emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. It begins to accept change rather than resisting it. Old age often gives people the space to reflect on these patterns. They begin to see that every moment of anger created unnecessary suffering. Every moment of greed created restlessness. Every moment of attachment created fear of loss. But every moment of compassion created warmth. Every moment of mindfulness created calm. Every moment of acceptance created freedom. Through this reflection, many people begin to understand that life is not truly measured by what we accumulate. It is measured by the quality of our awareness. The Buddha once compared the untrained mind to a wild horse. A wild horse runs in every direction. It is easily startled, easily distracted, easily exhausted. But when a horse is patiently trained, it becomes steady. It moves with control. It responds calmly to its surroundings. The mind can be trained in the same way, through mindfulness, through meditation, through compassionate action, through understanding the nature of impermanence. Old age often shows people that they spent many years training the wrong things. They trained their ability to compete. They trained their ability to achieve. They trained their ability to acquire more. But they did not always train their ability to understand their own mind. And so even when they achieved success, peace sometimes remained distant. But those who begin to cultivate awareness discover something powerful. Peace is not something that arrives from the outside. Peace is something that grows from within. It grows slowly, like a tree planted in fertile soil. Each moment of mindfulness nourishes it. Each act of kindness strengthens it. Each moment of understanding deepens its roots. Eventually, this inner peace becomes stable. It remains present even when life becomes difficult. It remains present even when circumstances change. It remains present even as the body grows older, because it is not dependent on external conditions. It is rooted in understanding. The Buddha described this state as liberation from unnecessary suffering, not because life becomes perfect, but because the mind learns how to remain balanced in the face of impermanence. Old age often becomes the moment when people finally see this clearly. They look back over their life and realize something profound. The most meaningful moments were not moments of victory. They were moments of awareness, moments of connection, moments of kindness, moments when the mind was truly present. They begin to see that happiness was never hidden in the distant future. It was always available in the present moment, but the restless mind was too busy searching elsewhere to notice it. This realization can feel both beautiful and bittersweet. Beautiful because the truth becomes clear. Bittersweet because many years were spent searching in the wrong places. But wisdom is never wasted. The moment the mind awakens to this truth, a new way of living becomes possible. Instead of chasing endless desires, a person begins to cultivate contentment. Instead of reacting with anger, they respond with patience. Instead of clinging to what cannot stay, they appreciate what is present now. This is the deepest realization many people discover as they grow older. In the end, the external story of life becomes less important. Titles fade, possessions remain behind, achievements become memories. But the condition of the mind continues to shape every moment of experience. A peaceful mind transforms life. A compassionate mind transforms relationships. A wise mind transforms suffering into understanding. The Buddha encouraged every person to begin cultivating this inner transformation as early as possible, because the sooner the mind begins to awaken, the more peaceful the journey of life becomes. Those who understand this truth while they are still young carry a special advantage. They do not need to wait decades for wisdom to arrive. They can begin living with awareness today. They can walk through the world with calmness instead of constant anxiety. They can appreciate each moment instead of endlessly chasing the next one. They can live with compassion instead of resentment. And when the final chapters of life eventually arrive, they do not face them with regret. They face them with understanding, because they already discovered the most important truth. In the end, the greatest treasure a person can cultivate is a peaceful and awakened mind. Everything else will eventually pass, but wisdom remains. And this is the final realization many people only fully understand when they grow old. Yet those who listen carefully to the teachings of the Buddha can begin discovering it much earlier, long before time itself forces the lesson upon them. Life moves quietly, day by day, year by year. And before we realize it, decades have passed. The Buddha often reminded his followers that human life is very rare and very precious, not because it lasts forever, but because it gives us the opportunity to awaken, to understand, to live with wisdom. Many people spend their entire youth searching for happiness in the outside world. They search in success. They search in possessions. They search in recognition. But as the years pass, life slowly reveals a deeper truth. True peace was never hidden in the world. It was always waiting within the mind. The 7 realizations we explored today are lessons that many people only discover after living many decades. But you do not have to wait for old age to understand them. You can begin today. You can begin to release unnecessary worries. You can begin to stop chasing endless desires. You can begin to appreciate the people around you. You can begin to let go of anger. You can begin to train the mind to become calm, compassionate, and aware. Because the Buddha did not teach wisdom only for the elderly. He taught it for anyone who wishes to live with clarity and peace. And the earlier we begin walking this path, the more peaceful our journey through life becomes. So tonight, take a quiet moment, reflect on your own life. Which of these realizations have you already experienced, and which ones are you still learning? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience may help someone else see life more clearly. And if this teaching brought you even a small moment of peace, consider supporting the channel so more people can discover these timeless Buddhist lessons. Until next time, may your mind grow calmer, may your heart grow kinder, and may wisdom guide every step of your journey, just as the Buddha taught.